some point today your heart will beat. You will not notice it. You will not think about it. It will simply happen as it has happened billions of times before, without your awareness or permission. And then one day it will stop. Not dramatically. Not the way movies show it. For most people, death arrives quietly. A final breath, a last heartbeat, a moment of stillness so ordinary it is almost indistinguishable from sleep. And then the most extraordinary biological process you will ever experience begins. Your body does not stop all at once. That is the first thing most people get wrong. Death is not a moment. It is a cascade. A sequence of events so precise, so ordered, so biologically inevitable that scientists can use it to tell time, to calculate within hours how long ago someone died. Your body after death is not simply inert matter. It is a system in transition, running a final program, completing the last task it was ever given. What happens to your body in the moments, hours, and days after death is one of the most fascinating stories in all of biology. And almost nobody knows it. The first thing that changes is oxygen. Your cells need oxygen to survive. Every cell in your body is constantly consuming it, using it to produce energy through a process called cellular respiration. When your heart stops, the delivery of oxygen stops with it. But the cells do not know this yet. For a brief window, seconds to a few minutes, depending on the cell type, they keep trying. They burn through their remaining oxygen. They attempt to switch to backup energy systems. They send distress signals. The brain is the most sensitive. Neurons begin to malfunction within 4 to 6 minutes of oxygen deprivation. This is why the window for resuscitation is so narrow. This is why a stopped heart must be restarted quickly. After roughly 10 minutes without oxygen, the brain damage becomes irreversible. The neurons that were you, your memories, your personality, your fears, your loves, begin to fail silently, one by one. But the rest of the body is more resilient than you might expect. Skin cells can survive for several hours after the heart stops. Some cells in bone marrow have been successfully harvested more than 24 hours after death. Corneas, the transparent front surface of the eye, can remain viable for transplantation for up to 12 hours post-mortem. Your body is not a single entity that lives or dies all at once. It is a community of trillions of cells, each with its own timeline, its own clock, its own negotiation with mortality. Within minutes of death, something visible begins to happen. The muscles, deprived of the signals that kept them in a state of partial contraction, begin to relax. Every muscle in the body releases simultaneously. The face goes slack. The bladder releases. The bowels may release. The jaw falls open slightly. The body assumes, for the first and only time, a state of complete and total muscular relaxation. Thanatologists, researchers who study death, call this primary flaccidity. The body is entirely at rest. But this rest does not last. Somewhere between 2 and 6 hours after death, something strange begins to happen in the muscles. Without oxygen, cells can no longer produce energy through normal means. They begin to use an emergency backup process that produces lactic acid as a byproduct. The lactic acid causes the proteins inside muscle fibers, actin and myosin, to lock together. And when those proteins lock, the muscle cannot relax. It becomes rigid. This is rigor mortis, the stiffening of the dead. It begins in the smallest muscles first, the eyelids, the jaw, the fingers. Then it spreads through the neck, the chest, the abdomen, the legs, following a predictable anatomical progression. At its peak, roughly 12 hours after death, the entire body is rigid. A person in full rigor mortis is completely inflexible. Limbs cannot be bent. The face is fixed. The body has locked into whatever position it was in when the process completed. And then, as reliably as it arrived, rigor mortis begins to reverse. After 24 to 48 hours, the proteins that caused the rigidity begin to break down. The muscles soften again. The body returns to flaccidity, but not the clean primary flaccidity of the first hours. This is secondary flaccidity. The tissues are beginning to decompose. Something else has taken over. Because here is what is happening on a scale too small to see while rigor mortis runs its course. Your body is being consumed from within. Your gastrointestinal tract contains approximately 38 trillion microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, archaea, that spent your entire life helping you digest food, regulate immunity, and maintain internal balance. The moment your immune system stops functioning, these microorganisms are free. They begin to digest the body from the inside, starting with the intestines, spreading outward through the tissue in a process called autolysis combined with putrefaction. Autolysis is the body digesting itself. The enzymes that your cells used during life to break down nutrients and waste are released when the cell membranes rupture. They begin breaking down the surrounding tissue. The cells essentially dissolve themselves. It begins in organs with the highest enzyme concentrations, the pancreas, famous for beginning to digest itself within hours of death, followed by the stomach, the liver, the intestines. The gases produced by decomposition, primarily hydrogen sulfide, methane, and ammonia, begin to accumulate inside the body. The abdomen distends. The skin discolors, shifting through greens and purples as hemoglobin breaks down. In a process called marbling, the network of blood vessels becomes visible through the skin as dark branching lines. The body is broadcasting, in color and shape, the progress of its own dissolution. This is not failure. This is function. The decomposition of a body is one of the most important ecological processes in any ecosystem. The nutrients locked inside your tissues, nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, are being returned to the soil.
Insectes arrivent. Scavengers arrivent.
The carbon that was once you becomes available for plants which feed animals which eventually die and feed the soil again. You do not disappear. You redistribute. Scientists who study decomposition, a field called taphonomy, have documented this process in extraordinary detail, partly to assist forensic investigations and partly because understanding how bodies return to the earth gives us one of the clearest windows into how ecosystems actually cycle nutrients. Dr. Arpad Vass at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory spent years analyzing the chemical compounds released by decomposing bodies, cataloging over 400 distinct volatile organic compounds that the process produces. Each stage has its own chemical signature. The science of death is, in a very real sense, also the science of life. There is one more thing that happens after death that almost no one talks about, because it happens below the threshold of any individual cell or tissue or organ. Your DNA persists. Long after the cells that housed it have dissolved, the genetic information that defined every protein your body ever made, that determined your eye color and your height and your susceptibility to certain diseases, continues to survive. In dry conditions, DNA has been recovered from remains thousands of years old. From Egyptian mummies, from Neanderthal bones, from frozen mammoths. The blueprint outlasts the building by an almost incomprehensible margin of time. You are, at the most fundamental biological level, a temporary arrangement of information. The information does not vanish when the arrangement ends. It disperses, changes form. It continues in fragments in the soil, in the organisms that consumed you, in the DNA you passed to any children, in the atoms that were once your body now cycling through the world. The heart that has beaten billions of times without your awareness will stop without your awareness. And the body it sustained will begin, immediately and with remarkable efficiency, the process of returning everything it borrowed. Not as an ending, as a continuation. Right now, your heart is beating. You did not decide that. You do not control it. And somewhere, in a way that is both terrifying and strangely beautiful, that is also true of what comes next.